leaders of South Korea, the United States, and Japan are set to meet at Camp David next month to bolster trilateral cooperation against North Korea's aggressive nuclear and missile provocations. Condolences are pouring in tonight for a Marine who was found dead after going missing during a search and rescue operation. An investigation has been launched. So far, 46 people across the country have been killed during the recent deadly downpours. A total of 7 clusters have been named in South Korea as high-technology zones. Private investment worth over $483 billion will be injected into research and production of semiconductors, secondary batteries, and displays. It's July 20th, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. Another meeting by the three leaders of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan. President Yoon will be traveling to American presidential retreat of Camp David next month for talks with his host Joe Biden and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida. This as they bolster three-way economic and security cooperation at a high-stakes moment. Our top office correspondent Oh Soo-young begins our coverage.
The leaders of South Korea, the United States and Japan will meet again next month for a summit at the U.S. presidential retreat of Camp David, amid ongoing challenges to regional and economic security. President Yoon Suk-yeol will reportedly meet his counterparts on August 18th, after U.S. leader Joe Biden proposed a stateside trilateral at the G7 summit in Hiroshima 2 months ago. The upcoming meeting marks the first standalone summit between the three countries, as previous sit-downs took place on the sidelines of other summits. It's also the first time for the U.S. president to host foreign leaders at Camp David, which has been the site of several historic meetings and negotiations involving world leaders. The peaceful and secluded environment has fostered candid and constructive dialogues in the past, while the informal setting has promoted trust and understanding. So the question is, what will be discussed behind closed doors, and more importantly, what outcome will emerge from them? Yoon's principal deputy security advisor Kim Tae-ho hinted earlier this week that the three leaders would discuss security and economic cooperation, among other agenda items. The meeting notably comes after South Korea resumed military intel sharing with Tokyo and forged a new nuclear consultative group with Washington, ramping up security cooperation with both regional partners amid North Korea's missile testing.
Perhaps a discussion to set up an information sharing apparatus could be underway or could be placed on the table. And by doing so, the three nations could seek an opportunity to lay a concrete foundation for such a mechanism that could facilitate information sharing process in a contingency.
The three countries have also been increasing bilateral as well as trilateral forms of economic and tech cooperation, reviewing ways to bolster semiconductor production, batteries and supply chains of critical minerals. Observers expect the trilateral meeting to build on the leaders' pledge in Hiroshima to upgrade their cooperation to a new level in various areas, including in the sharing of missile warning data, their respective Indo-Pacific strategies, economic security, and engaging with Pacific Island nations. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Top nuclear envoys of South Korea, U.S. and Japan sat down in Tokyo today, following a fresh round of missile tests by North Korea, having reaffirmed cooperation to cut off funding for the regime's missile programs. Seoul's nuclear chief says Kim Jong-un has reached a dead end. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji reports.
South Korea's top nuclear envoy Kim Gov't has highlighted the need to strengthen trilateral cooperation between the U.S. and Japan to cut off illicit funding for North Korea's ballistic missile and weapons programs. He said this while holding a trilateral meeting in Tokyo on Thursday afternoon with his American and Japanese counterparts, Sung Kim and Takehiro Funakoshi. Noting that Kim Jong-un has reached a dead end, Kim Gov't said that at the top of their list is repatriating overseas North Korean workers and clamping down on malicious cyber activities. He also added that they will look for further action that can be taken to close the loopholes in the sanctions that are placed on North Korea, and said they're still open to talks.
We will strengthen our close communication and coordination to bring North Korea back to the path to denuclearization.
The U.S. nuclear envoy also said Washington remains committed to achieving denuclearization.
Our security commitments to our allies and partners are ironclad and unwavering, and we will continue to take steps to demonstrate our commitment to extended deterrence.
The three officials last met in person in Seoul this April. Thursday's meeting comes a day after North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles in an apparent protest against the arrival of an American nuclear ballistic missile submarine in South Korea, with the new Seoul-Washington security dialogue taking place for the first time on Tuesday. The regime also launched a solid-fuel ICBM last Wednesday. The talks also come at a sensitive time after an American service member crossed the inter-Korean border into North Korea, fleeing before being sent back home to face military discipline. 배은지, Arirang News.
To the latest on the recent deadly downpours here in Korea, a member of the South Korean Marine Corps who had been part of a monsoon rain damage search operation has been found dead. At least 50 people have been killed or remain missing. Our Shin Ha-young has the latest.
Heavy rainfall during this year's monsoon season has resulted in the deaths of at least 46 people. But the death toll could rise as according to the data from the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters, as of 11 a.m. Thursday, 4 are still missing. In addition, 35 people have been injured while over 17,000 have had to evacuate from their homes. About 3,000 are still unable to return. The body of a Marine who was swept away by a rapid stream on Wednesday during search and rescue operations has been found. Rescue workers found the Marine corporal who was serving with the 1st Marine Infantry Division in the Naesung Stream in Gyeongsangbuk-do Province late Wednesday night, 14 hours after he was reported missing. However, authorities explained that he has not been added to the official death toll from the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters to avoid confusion.
The Marine Corps is currently investigating the accident and evaluating safety procedures of the search and rescue team that was dispatched at the site of the heavy rainfall.
President Yoon Suk-yeol on Thursday expressed his deep condolences, saying that the government will thoroughly investigate the cause to prevent a recurrence. Meanwhile, on Thursday morning, authorities opened an investigation into the tragic accident in Osong in Cheongju City, Chungcheongbuk-do Province, where 14 people died in a flooded tunnel. The investigation is focused on determining if the levee functioned as intended and whether it was sufficient to endure water pressure. 4 hours before the tragedy, it was confirmed that the local government had received 3 separate flood warnings, including 2 from the Kum River Flood Control Office, specifically about the Osong Tunnel. There were also several emergency calls made by members of the public. With the heavy rain alert lifted, the Central Disaster Headquarters has lowered its response level to the lowest of the 3 levels. The Korean Meteorological Agency issued a heatwave warning for the northern regions of Gyeonggi-do Province and Gangwon-do Province, as well as advisories in Seoul and the southern regions. This heatwave is forecasted to last until Friday, and as the weekend begins, hot conditions are expected to cool down with nationwide rain in the forecast. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
The Korean government has named 7 regions as special clusters for national advanced strategic industries to bolster chips, displays, and rechargeable batteries using private investment. Our Lee Si-hoo reports on the significance of this project.
The government has designated 7 regions across the country as what it calls special clusters for national advanced strategic industries to foster the growth of cutting-edge technologies and into which it will invest 614 trillion Korean won, or around $483 billion. The announcement was made by the Office for Government Policy Coordination after being finalized at a related committee meeting presided over by Prime Minister Han Duck-soo.
The South Korean government will give all directional support for these special clusters to become global innovation areas with internationally overpowering production capacity.
The designated clusters are Yongin and Pyeongtaek in Gyeonggi-do Province, Gumi and Pohang both in Gyeongsang-buk-do Province, Cheonan and Asan in Chungcheongnam-do Province, Cheongju in Chungcheongbuk-do Province, the Saemangeum Coastal Region in Jeollabuk-do Province, and Ulsan Metropolitan City. 21 regions applied for the government designation and support, but only the 7 were selected, based on criteria such as the presence of innovative enterprises in the region, investment plans, and potential for growth. The clusters will focus on advancing technologies in semiconductors, displays, and rechargeable batteries, among others. The special clusters will receive, quote, a comprehensive support package such as expedited government approvals, tax benefits, and budgetary support. Additionally, in the second half of the year, a pan-ministry council will be formed to provide a one-stop support service for the clusters. Meanwhile, the government also selected 8 universities, including Seoul National and Seonggyungwan, to advance the cutting-edge technology required by these industrial clusters. To support them, the government is going to invest 54 billion Korean won to set up interdisciplinary curriculums and recruit talented teaching professionals. These moves follow a promise made by President Yoon Suk-yeol at an emergency meeting on the economy back in March.
오늘 발표된 국가 첨단 산업단지 조성이 신속하게 추진될 수 있도록 정부는 모든 노력을 다하겠습니다.
The government is also looking to expand the list of universities that it will support as it seeks to foster qualified talent that industries are looking for. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
The global smartphone market saw a decline in the second quarter of this year, though there are apparent signs of a recovery. A report by technology market analyst firm Canalys on Thursday showed that shipments of smartphones from April to June fell 11% on year. But the report noted that with the global economy stabilizing, inventory levels are also becoming more stable. It added that the decrease in the sales volume in the first 2 quarters of this year had been in and around the 10% range, down from 20% in the fourth quarter of last year. Samsung had the greatest market share with 21%, maintaining its position from the previous quarter, followed by Apple and Xiaomi. There's a program in Korea to foster what's called unicorn startups, as there had been less private investment in these firms. Our Lee Soo-jin takes a closer look at this project and what more needs to be done.
South Korea's unicorn startups boast cutting-edge technologies that have been recognized globally, but investment in the nation's startups have been plunging. During the first half of this year, $1.8 billion was invested in domestic startups. This is nearly 70% lower compared to the previous year. The fall in investment has made it difficult for startups to get private funding for their businesses. The Ministry of SMEs and Startups program that helps startups get bank loans through its public guarantee institution is thus receiving more attention.
So the selected firms will be provided the guarantee of up to 20 billion won by Korea Technology Finance Corporation.
One of the 15 companies selected this year was Gov't, a company slated to become the nation's first food and beverage unicorn startup.
Times like this, it's very difficult to source capital in the market, so we are very fortunate that.
According to the ministry, Gov't was chosen for its advanced food technology. It uses AI to monitor the entire process of putting toppings on pizza to maintain the same quality across all stores. It also uses automated cutting technology, minimizing the amount of human labor needed. Many companies have benefited from this program since its launch in 2019. One company that achieved unicorn status is Jikbang, which provides 3D virtual tours of apartments available for rent.
It helped us greatly financially. It provided us an opportunity to secure long-term funds, and because it meant that our potential was recognized by the government, it helped us draw more investment.
And this year, the ministry is also focusing on ways to help companies enter foreign markets and attract global investors.
We will give companies the opportunity to participate in global IR.
There is still much that can be done, though.
When startups go overseas, there's nobody to help them. We don't even have an office. It's very difficult to source new human resources.
He said that having government-supported facilities overseas where startups can receive consultations could be helpful. If the government continues to expand on its current measures, South Korea could see even more innovative unicorn startups in the future. 이수진, Arirang News.
The average age of employees in South Korea is forecast to reach 54 by the year 2050. That's 10 years higher than the OECD average. This was revealed on Thursday in a report by the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It added that it could speed up with the growing number of working seniors. It also said that last year, people in their 50s or over accounted for more than half the country's employment figures when it came to low-skilled jobs, mostly in manufacturing industries, noting labor shortages could worsen down the road. Chinese President Xi Jinping met with former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger in Beijing amid tense Washington-Beijing relations. The two, according to Chinese state media CCTV on Thursday, met at the Daya OU Thai State Guest House. Details regarding the talks have not been disclosed. Kissinger played a key role in improving bilateral ties between Washington and Beijing in the 1970s, while serving as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor during the Nixon and Ford administrations. The former U.S. diplomat has also met with other Chinese senior officials, including top diplomat Wang Yi and Defense Minister Li Shangfu. In response to Kissinger's latest trip to China, the White House noted that he is not acting on behalf of the U.S. government. The 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup officially kicked off on Thursday. Co-hosts New Zealand got things underway and beat Norway 1-0 at Auckland's Eden Park. 32 countries are taking part in the tournament, which is being held in Australia and New Zealand. South Korea, led by head coach Colin Bell, are in Group H and will play their first game against Colombia on July 25th in Sydney. Korea's other group stage matches are against Morocco and Germany. After the Auckland shooting incident on Thursday morning, the New Zealand government assured participants and fans of its commitment to improving security, while FIFA offered condolences for the loss of life and pledged its full support. We take a closer look at the economy today. New social media service Threads has been grabbing headlines for its unusual popularity. Will it be a wind of change in the social media ecosystem, or is it going to just end up being a fad? For more on this, we have our business correspondent Lee Dae-hyun here with us in the studio. Hi, Dae-hyun.
Great to be back, Jung-min.
So how popular is Threads, and how it has gained popularity in such a short period of time?
Well, we've seen one of the fastest sign-up rates for a social media app. Not only social media, but if you take a look at ChatGPT, for example, it took 2 months to reach 100 million accounts. Threads reached 100 million in less than a week. Well-known global celebrities and public figures are also joining Threads, including Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey. According to the South Korean real-time data service WiseApp, more than 1 million people in South Korea signed up for Threads within 5 days of its launch. The speed is absolutely incomparable. Now, Threads is a text-based social network service that resembles Twitter. The app was built by the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, Meta, which means users can link the two social media apps, making it very easy for the 2 billion Instagram users to make a Threads account. Meta even said Threads will be, quoted, powered by Instagram. And some recent controversial decisions made by Twitter and its owner Elon Musk have triggered some users to migrate to another app. In March, Twitter launched a new monthly and annual paid subscription service. Users also now need to pay to have a blue tick. So basically, you have to pay to use Twitter without restrictions, as it limits you to read 1,000 posts a day for free. Let's take a listen to what an expert had to say about this.
This seems very timely, and I'm sure they've been working on it for quite some time, but this was perfect timing with just the latest sort of little fiasco on Twitter with Musk rate limiting users and all that stuff. So yeah, the timing was perfect, and so it's not too much of a surprise, as expected in a way, yeah.
And this looks like Mark Zuckerberg might face some challenges from Elon Musk.
That may be the case, as some website traffic statistics sites prove that people tend to use Twitter less after Threads was launched. SimilarWeb said traffic on Twitter for the first 2 days after Threads was introduced dropped by 5% compared to the previous week. Compared to a year ago, it's a drop of 11%. Like I said, the system and the user interfaces of the two are quite similar. Some differences they have: character limits and the length of any video you post. Threads, however, do not have a hashtag function, no direct messaging, or a keyword searching system. Now, Twitter's new CEO, Linda Yaccarino, tweeted that the company is, quote, often imitated, a clear reference to Threads. A lawyer for Twitter, Alex Spiro, also sent a letter to Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg accusing the company of engaging in, quote, systematic, willful, and unlawful misappropriation of Twitter's trade secrets and other intellectual property, demanding that, quote, Meta take immediate steps to stop using any Twitter trade secrets or other highly confidential information. What we're seeing now is back and forth online warfare, with Threads being at the center.
And Lehyun, so what does the arrival of Threads mean for Twitter?
Well, we might want to keep an eye on that. Well, Thread is not actually released in Europe yet due to the Digital Markets Act, which bans U.S. big tech companies from dominating the European market. But there's a high possibility, experts say, that the service will be introduced in Europe in a very short time. However, we have already seen that some new social media services come and go fast. For instance, Apple's Clubhouse went viral in the pandemic era, where people could communicate in audio chat rooms. But with some social media services, the novelty wears off. As for Threads, users have complained that the app drains their batteries, so it still has some things to overcome to become a major player in the market.
We will have to wait and see how it all plays out. All right, thank you for your report. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Blistering heat has baked much of South Korea. Heatwave alerts are currently in place for most inland regions. For parts of the Seoul metropolitan area and Gangwon-do province, conditions are especially hot, with warnings in effect. Scorching temperatures will continue until tomorrow. Daytime highs in Seoul will be more sweltering tomorrow at 33 degrees Celsius. High moisture levels in the air will make conditions feel hotter than the actual readings. After, temperatures will be on a cooling trend until the weekend, with the help of cold monsoonal showers. Extreme heat will lead to unstable atmospheric conditions. This will produce on and off showers for inland regions. Expect about 5 to 40 millimeters. Mostly sunny skies are in the forecast for the morning hours. Seoul and Gwangju will be starting off at 24 degrees. Scattered outbreaks of rainfall become more widespread by the daytime. As for the daily highs, Seoul and Daejeon will get up to 33, Gwangju 32, Busan and Jeju will be reaching 29 degrees. Another round of monsoon rain is in the forecast this coming Saturday. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thanks for watching. A panel session up next.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
제주도에 처음에 놀러 갔을 때 새롭게 단장했다고 얘기가 나와봤는데
할게요. 스트릿 사진 한 장이었는데 혼자서 좋은 건축을
한국인들만의 마음도
같이 갈래요?
웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
K-animation, loved and watched around the world. We want to make more animations to reach more children. Traveling time and space. Developing adventure and curiosity. Infinite creativity and hope. We want our children to grow up to be happy. K-animation, watched by children all around the world. so that joy can be felt when our animation is watched. This is the reason we make animation and share with the world. K-Animation, befriending children all over the world.
Hello everyone, it's Thursday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. The U.S. Special Climate Envoy John Kerry's 4-day visit to Beijing came to an end, though there were expectations that the world's two biggest carbon polluters could reach a new agreement after rounds of closed-door meetings. The two failed to find an immediate breakthrough. What different views do they have? And aside from that, could we say the two countries are now seeing a starting point to thaw their frosty bilateral ties? To discuss this, we invite Dr. Kim Yang-gyu, a principal researcher at the East Asia Institute. Dr. Kim, welcome.
Thank you.
And we also have Mr. Jeff Moon, president of China Moon Strategies and the former assistant U.S. trade representative for China. Mr. Moon, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, now first question to our Dr. Kim. Now, the visit of former Secretary of State John Kerry to China is the third visit by a U.S. official to Beijing in recent weeks. And what does the U.S. climate envoy's visit hint at?
Yeah, right. As you mentioned, Mr. Kerry's visit to China was the third visit by American senior officials to Beijing after Secretary Blinken and Secretary Yellen. And I believe his visit will be followed by Commerce Secretary Raimondo's visit in the near future. And this implies that, first, I think Washington is willing to renew talks between senior level officials from the two countries, as agreed upon by President Biden and President Xi during the Bali summit last November. While there have not been any major achievements from these talks so far, this renewed engagement might pave the way of rapprochement between the two countries later this year. Second, I also believe that Special Envoy Kerry's visit implies a general shift in Washington's China policy, with the U.S. now implementing its de-risking strategy. Since President von der Leyen mentioned the term in her speech in April this year, it has been widely used by senior American officials in their public speeches and by American leaders during the G7 Hiroshima summit. And they use it to explain that their China policies do not involve decoupling. Although the actual meaning of the term is debatable, I think it basically indicates that there are areas where they want to compete with China, such as cutting-edge technologies like AI, that has significant military implications. But there are other areas they want to cooperate with China. So the climate change has consistently been included among the areas of cooperation. So the visit of U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate itself demonstrates Washington's willingness to engage with China.
Right. So the visit was significant in that it paved the way to improve bilateral ties. Now, our focus was on tackling climate crisis, and I'd like to delve a little deeper into this. So, Mr. Moon, Washington and Beijing, we need to know that they are the world's top two greenhouse gas emitters. How are they, especially China, seeing the urgency of the climate change issue, and how are they trying to deal with this?
Well, in a literal sense, both countries are seeing the urgency of climate change every day as they observe record high temperatures, flooding, and forest fires. In a political sense, however, the picture is mixed, and government leaders are not reacting as quickly as they should. As you said, China is currently the world's top emitter of greenhouse gases, emitting more than twice as much as the U.S., but the U.S. has produced more historically. So Xi Jinping this week repeated China's pledge to reach peak emissions by 2030 and to reach zero emissions by 2060. He emphasized that China will proceed at its own pace, which includes continuing to build more coal-fired plants than any other country. The U.S. thinks that China's current pace is too slow. So John Kerry has consistently pressed his counterparts to accelerate the current timetable, but without any success. Meanwhile, both countries are investing in environmentally friendly technologies, but those efforts, quite frankly, are not sufficient to prevent global warming at the current pace.
Right, I see. Now, Dr. Kim, that being said, Mr. Kerry specifically urged China to partner with the U.S. to cut the methane emissions and reduce coal-fired power. Now, could you give us details on what Mr. Kerry asked China to do to tackle this climate crisis?
Actually, the special envoy Kerry mentioned a few issues during his testimony before the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on July 13th regarding his meeting agenda with his counterparts in China. And he said methane is 20 to 80 times more destructive than carbon dioxide, and it is particularly important for U.S. China cooperation on climate change. Then he mentioned that accelerating ways of doing things and increasing the deployment of renewables are his main areas of focus. However, he emphasized that by 2030, China will have somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 gigawatts of renewable energy, which is 5 times larger than any other country on the planet. So China is a very interesting case. And it is very obvious that he would have urged China to phase out coal faster rather than invest more in clean energy. And China has pledged to peak carbon emission by 2030, as just Mr. Moon said, and achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. And President Xi Jinping also promised that China will reduce its use of coal starting 2026. However, it doesn't seem likely to happen if China's current dependence on coal continues in the near future. And Mr. Kerry confirmed that this during his digital press briefing today. And he did talk more about phasing out rather than investing more. And he said, one, transition from coal-based power more rapidly, and two, having a positive impact together to make the COP successful, and three, discussing how to deal with non-carbon dioxide gases like methane were the top 3 issues he discussed.
Right. So it seems like China has its own goals regarding this climate crisis, and it seems the U.S. is trying to request China to speed up this plan. But Mr. Moon, according to some local media outlets, Chinese experts point out that the U.S. needs to show its sincerity by removing, punitive measures on China's green industry, such as tariffs on solar panels and so on. What's China's position in terms of cooperating with the U.S. on this issue?
Several Chinese officials and the state-controlled Global Times recounted this week how China suspended climate change discussions after the U.S. Speaker of the House visited Taiwan last August. They emphasized that future climate cooperation is not possible without alignment on Taiwan policy. So China is not seeking sincerity, but rather a change in U.S. policy regarding Taiwan. Meanwhile, the same Global Times criticized U.S. restrictions on the import of Chinese solar panels without mentioning the 2 reasons why those measures were imposed. First, the U.S. imposed tariffs because China subsidizes those products and dumps them overseas below cost, which is punishable in the United States through tariffs. Second, significant evidence that anyone can find on the internet shows that the polysilicon used to manufacture solar products in China's Xinjiang region are the product of forced labor. And the U.S. has banned forced labor imports for a century or so. So the picture is a lot more complicated than the Chinese press version of the story.
I believe what our Mr. Moon talked about resonates more in that China's top diplomat Wang Yi said that cooperation cannot be, separated from overall environment between the 2 countries. Now, Dr. Kim, however, from Washington's point of view, it does not seem an easy decision for the U.S. to remove what China calls punitive measures on China's, certain industries. Is that the case? I mean, can the U.S. provide what China wants in terms of, changing its own policy, like our Mr. Moon pointed out?
Yeah, I think Mr. Moon already beautifully answered the question, and these all things are, the main motivation behind the Inflation Reduction Act is try to reboost and build robust solar industry within the U.S. And so this measure is closely connected to protecting American industries and addressing the human rights issues, as he just mentioned. So this is not going to be easy for U.S. to change. And besides, according to reports from Chinese official media outlets and the PRC Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, the indicators for sincerity the Chinese high officials like Premier Li Chang and Director Wang Yi use include technical support to developing countries in their green transition. And they also argued that U.S.-China climate change cooperation is inseparable from the overall development of bilateral relations. And one of the primary hurdles preventing the development of healthy relations according to China, between the U.S. and China, according to China, Chinese experts pointed out the prohibition of investment in China's semiconductor, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence sectors. Yet these technologies are, I believe, precisely the list of sensitive technologies that could tilt the military balance between the U.S. and China that National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan mentioned while he explains Washington's de-risking strategy. So this is not going to happen, for sure. And that's why also Mr. Kerry made it very clear that there is no concession to China when he testified before the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on July 13th.
Right, I see. Now, Mr. Moon, given what our experts told us up until now, could we say that it would be difficult for, climate negotiations to serve as a way to tackle the other political issues between the two countries?
Well, I think that that's basically correct, at least in theory. I think at the beginning of the Biden administration, Secretary of State Blinken said there are three kinds of issues in the bilateral relationship. They include some where we cooperate, others where we compete, and yet others where we will confront each other. If you look at the issues involving potential cooperation, most of them are transnational in nature. They include not only climate change, but also, say, North Korea, pandemics, other issues that affect all nations and all people. And in all cases, cooperation between the U.S. and China would contribute significantly to the task of finding and developing solutions. So I think the hope in the U.S. is that establishing a cooperative spirit in the transnational context might spill over to some degree in the bilateral context. And for that reason, it's a positive sign that at least Xi Jinping, the lead climate negotiator, has suggested that cooperation on climate change might have a positive impact on the broader relationship, although there are other Chinese statements to the contrary.
I see. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. Now, Mr. Moon, one more question. Let's move on to the upcoming schedule. The U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo is also set to visit Beijing soon. Could there be any noteworthy developments in bilateral relationship stemming from these visits?
Well, it's important to interpret a visit by Secretary Raimondo, which has yet to be officially announced, in context. Presidents Biden and Xi agreed last November in Bali to try to stabilize bilateral relations through these high-level visits. And a Raimondo visit would be the next step in that process. But what's different about Raimondo is that her portfolio includes some of the most contentious issues in the bilateral relationship. She's responsible for export controls, the CHIPS Act rollout, and promoting American export, among other things. I think that most observers anticipate that her visit will not result in major concessions on either side. She will not, for example, offer changes in American sanctions policy, just as the Chinese will not change their policy of converting foreign civilian technologies for military purposes, including weapons. So it'll be interesting to see how the Chinese leaders react to her, and her reception will indicate where we're going in the bilateral relationship and whether the dialogue will improve relations.
I see. Now, Dr. Kim, meanwhile, the Kremlin recently said that a trip by Putin to China is on the agenda, though the details have not been released yet. Now, what message might China and Russia be trying to send by showing off their ties amid, improving relationship between the U.S. and China?
Well, I'm not sure whether they intend to show off their ties, but yes, there has been consistent pattern of China and Russia strengthening their relations with each other and with other authoritarian regions like North Korea since the outbreak of war in Ukraine. And this is why Pyongyang believes the world is rapidly shifting into a new Cold War era. And the UN Security Council has continuously failed to condemn DPRK's violation of UN Security Council resolution due to the opposition from China and Russia. And meanwhile, South Korean President Yoon, as you already know, made a surprise visit to Ukraine on July 15th, and Washington welcomed this. So it looks like the world is divided into two camps, supporting either Russia or Ukraine. But the Russian unprovoked attack and violation of territorial sovereignty of Ukraine actually directly goes against China's long-held principle of respecting internal affairs and territorial integrity. So I believe that supporting Moscow will likely become more of a liability than a strategic asset for Beijing in the long run. However, as Beijing kept criticizing, Washington has the capability to suppress China's advancement in key technologies like semiconductor and AI, I just mentioned before. So China needs to build a stronger partnership with other countries to fight against this pressure. That is why Director Wang Yi said that de-risking is another term for decoupling and urged the EU to clarify its strategic positioning when he met EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy Borrell last week in Jakarta, and also when President Xi Jinping met with Russian Federation Council Speaker Matvienko on July 10th, he emphasized that the development of China-Russia relations is a strategic choice based on fundamental interests of the two countries. So I believe this is a marriage of convenience that will likely sustain for some time, for sure. But I'm not sure whether this marriage could hold up for long.
Oh, I see. Oh, now, Dr. Kim, though there's a long way to go, efforts to improve relations between China and the U.S. has certainly impacted the relationship between Seoul and Beijing as well. And recently, the foreign ministers of each country, Park Jin and the top diplomat Wang Yi, they met each other during ASEAN meetings in Jakarta. Now, how did you see this event?
Well, yeah, indeed, as far as I know, but Seoul has not officially used the term de-risking yet, but I guess South Korean government would also need to come up with its updated positioning between the U.S. and China that reflects changes in reality. The Yoon Suk-yeol administration's national security strategy published last month suggests that it will pursue a healthier and more mature relationship with China built on mutual respect and reciprocity. This basically means that there are limitation in areas of cooperation between the two countries because you say, we need this because we don't have it, right? So during the meeting in the Jakarta on the sideline of the 2023 ASEAN-related foreign ministers meetings, both Director Wang and Minister Park agreed that ROK and PRC are close neighbors sharing important common interests, and their cooperation would contribute to peace and stability in the region. However, while Director Wang strongly asserts that the Taiwan issue is at the core of China's core interest, that forms a political foundation of the bilateral relations, deciding the level of credibility towards Seoul, Minister Park replied that South Korea's position on the One China policy has not changed. But it seems that Director Wang Yi did not respond to Minister Park's request to play a constructive role for peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. In China, and Chinese media did not even report this as well. So I believe that although China emphasized the importance of acknowledging difference while pursuing the same point, or 구동존이, harmony in diversity, I sense more difference and not much of harmony here.
All right, I see. Now, I believe this would be our last question, but I'd like to ask both of our experts on this. Now, Mr. Moon, South Korea and China are not just close neighbors, but also inseparable partners in terms of trade and other sectors as well. So how should the two countries' relationship develop, in your opinion?
Well, I think both countries should and will act in accordance with their national interests. China is important to South Korea for a variety of reasons. China obviously is a large market that's a potential source of economic growth. But that growth potential comes with the cost of Chinese economic leverage. And China exploited that leverage, for example, during its boycott in response to South Korean deployment of THAAD missiles. So de-risking may be an important theme. In the political sphere, China is important because it may have some influence with North Korea. Although North Korea's ongoing aggressive behavior casts doubt on the extent of that influence and whether the Chinese are exercising it. From a military perspective, there are questions about Chinese military intentions in Asia and the potential impact on South Korean national security. So South Korea knows that it needs to proceed cautiously. China is, as you said, an inseparable partner in many ways, but that partnership brings both significant dangers and opportunities.
I see your point. How about you, Dr. Kim? What's your view on this?
I perfectly agree with what Mr. Moon said, but I also want to point out a couple of structural changes that are occurring now. And economic relations has been the driving force behind the development of ROC-PRC relations. And 10 years ago, I vividly remember that there's widespread perception that U.S. was Korea's important security partner, while China is our important economic partner. This is changing now. For the first time in 21 years, South Korea's current account balance with China registered deficit in 2022, while trade with the United States marked an all-time high surplus. Of course, this could be just transient trends due to the lingering effect of COVID-19 pandemic, but it also because of China's effort to become self-sufficient in producing electronic components, which it used to import from Korea. If this is the case, then China seeks further tech self-sufficiency to counter the decoupling or de-risking strategy of the like-minded countries in the West. It will have a significant and structural impact on the South Korea-China relations overall. And furthermore, while both Director Wang Yi and Minister Park Jin emphasize the importance of people-to-people exchanges, well, Korean and Chinese public perception of each other is currently at its historically low point. And I do believe that these changes are partly influenced by the intensifying strategic competition between the U.S. and China, the fighting between big guys. But however, this also stems from some structural changes occurring in our KPRC relations. And if these challenges are not addressed properly, we might need to fundamentally rethink the future path of bilateral relations.
Right, I see your point. Now, I'd like to ask many more questions to our experts, but unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. But thank you, Dr. Kim and Mr. Moon, for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Busan